I want to talk to you about becoming an apostolic people. And so there's a lot of, in the circles that we run in, there's a lot of talk about apostles. And how many of you know that for a long time we had threefold ministry? We had evangelists, pastors, and teachers. But now we've come into this place where we actually have fivefold ministry: apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. And so this afternoon I want to talk a little bit about apostolic ministry and the transformation of cities. And so before I do that, I want to just talk through like the word apostle. People ask questions like, why were there no apostles in the Old Testament? Well, one of the reasons why there was no apostles in the Old Testament is because the word wasn't yet invented. The word was invented about 400 years before Christ by the Greeks, and the word apostle means sent one. But it actually means to be sent from a place to another place, to reproduce in the place you're sent to what you were sent from until the place you're sent to looks like the place you're sent from. Or in simple terms, we call it cultural transformation. And so when the apostles, when Jesus walked the earth with his 12 disciples, the Romans were very aggressive. You know, when you're in Rome, you do as the Romans do. And so the Romans were very aggressive people, and they were conquering the world. And what they found is as they conquered cities, like let's say they conquered this city and then the next city and the next city, they'd come back to the first city they conquered and the people would be back to their old ways. And the Romans said, why are we conquering but we're not culturizing? So they picked up this Greek idea of apostles, and they commissioned some of their generals as apostles. They literally called some of their generals apostles. And they sent those apostles out to conquer with the military as they had before. But with the military, they also sent artists and politicians and teachers and philosophers, and you get the idea. They conquered and culturized until the cities they conquered actually looked like Roman cities. So when Jesus walked the earth, you'll remember that the Romans were actually ruling the Jews. So it's very interesting what Jesus, when he promoted his learners, the word disciple means learner, when he promoted his learners to leaders, there was lots of things he could have called them. He could have called them patriarchs. There was 12 patriarchs, of course, and there was 12 apostles. He could have called them priests because there was the whole Levitical priestly order. He could have called them prophets. There was the school of the prophets and the company of the prophets. But instead, Jesus chooses this secular word, like as secular as our word CEO. And he said, you know those guys that are always trying to get us to act like Romans, those apostles who are trying to culturize us? You are my apostles. And he commissions his leaders as apostles. And then he gives them an apostolic prayer. Remember this prayer? Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Help me. Thy kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. How many understand that when you received Jesus Christ, Ephesians 2, you were seated where? In heavenly places. Where though? With Christ. How many know your job is to look around heaven and reproduce heaven on earth? We have lots of people trying to get people to heaven, but how many know the emphasis of Jesus wasn't getting you to heaven, it was getting heaven in you? In other words, everyone is trying to, we have pastors and leaders trying to build the church. How many know Jesus said, I'll build the church? Isn't it funny? He said, I'll build the church and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. He said 127 times, you extend the kingdom. It's funny that we spend all of our time trying to build the church and wonder who's extending the kingdom. And part of the challenge is that we think the church is the kingdom. And I'd like to suggest that all the church is in the kingdom, but not all the kingdom's in the church. And so Jesus gives his apostles this apostolic prayer that our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. How many understand that's an apostolic prayer? That the goal is to make earth like heaven. until the New Jerusalem comes down. And how many understand that when that verse it says that there'll no longer be any tears, there'll no longer be any pain? Did you ever notice that that was not in heaven? It was on earth, because heaven came to earth. And the fulfillment of the prayer, that was the only prayer we were ever taught to pray, that it would be on earth as it is in heaven. And finally the New Jerusalem comes down to earth. And there's no longer any tears, no longer any pain.